We may have a few people wandering in. We'll just let them do that. And I'm Mackey McNeill, the President and CEO of Mackey Advisors, and it's my pleasure to talk to you for the next 2 hours. Don't fall over. We won't make it too boring. Actually, our topic for today is peace and prosperity in today's economy, and I think we could all use a little of that. However, when Chris came in today, I realized that all we need to do is we all need to go get body shops. Because if you've got a body shop, you're pretty busy these days, especially with the local weather. Yeah. So there's a recession-proof business for us all to consider. So we'll take questions as we go. Please ask them. If I'm going to answer them later, I'll just say I'm going to answer that later. If not, it's probably a question that everybody wants to know, and it'll be great that you ask it so everybody can know it. This presentation will be posted on our website, cultivatingprosperity.com, and I'll invite you to go there anytime you want to refer to it, because there might be some slides. We don't print out the slides anymore to save paper, but the slides will all be there on the website, so you can look at anything in detail. Okay. So since we're going to talk about prosperity, I thought we might start with, what does it take to be prosperous? And there are some conditions for prosperity, so let's look at those. Well, I think the first condition is that we have a clear intention. We have to intend to be prosperous if we want to be prosperous. The next thing is to make a conscious choice. How do I make a conscious choice that this is what I want in my life? And of course, if we're making a choice for something, then we may be excluding other things in our life. So if we want to achieve financial independence, for example, we might be having to choose to save some money today that we could otherwise spend on something else. A supportive belief structure. Do you believe you can be prosperous? Is that part of who you think you are? Do you have the discipline? Are you willing to be disciplined about your savings plan? Do you have a long-term view? One of the things we're going to talk about today is the long-term perspective that's really required to make sense of the investment markets. Do you have a financial plan? Do you know that people who have financial plans have twice the money of those who don't? So that's a pretty interesting idea. So having a plan, you have twice the money if you don't. So the question is, do you get the plan first and then the money, or do you get the money and then you go get a plan? Well, my experience after 26 years is having the plan helps you accumulate the money. Certainly helps you accumulate it faster because there's some clear choice there. And the last thing is, I think it takes a prosperity paradigm of enoughness to be prosperous. And I first heard that idea from a Native American woman at a socially responsible investment conference in Canada. And she said the reason that Western civilization and Native American civilizations do not get along is because they don't have the same value system. And she had several different things besides this, but the one that really struck me was this whole idea of enoughness. She said in Native American cultures, we get to the point that we realize we have enough. So we don't take anymore. We wait, we leave the rest for the next generation or the generations thereafter. But in Western society, we don't ever think we have enough. So I also think that there's a quality of peace that comes when we know we have enough, that we don't have if we're always wanting something else. So how can we, inside of ourselves, find our place of enoughness, know that we have enough? I think that's important in terms of bringing on peace to ourselves in terms of our own prosperity. All right, so our agenda is we're going to talk about perspectives and possibilities. The last 6 months has been very interesting in the investment market community and the financial community. Business owners have had their own challenges, and of course as investors you've had your challenges. How did we get to this point in our economy? What happened? What were the things that came together to create the financial crisis that we have today? What are the things that no matter what's happening you should never forget? I call them my never forget rules. Like no matter whether we're expanding or contracting, these are the never forget things. Always remember. The prosperity planning basics, we're going to look at what it is to do a prosperity plan, how it might work. Then we're going to look a little bit at risk. Nobody likes risk, but it is a fact of life. We're going to look at some basic ideas around stocks and bonds. We're going to look at asset allocation, which we call a prosperous investment strategy. We're going to look at how the future might be different from the past. What you're hearing is that the future is going to be different. Well, how is the future going to be different from the past? And then we'll sort of summarize, and then we'll look a little bit at our firm and how we're different. Okay? Does anybody have any questions before we start? Perspectives and possibilities. I've put together a series of Time magazine headlines and articles for you to look at. And first I'm just going to ask you to sort of guess when they were. Okay? Actually, I'm not going to have you guess when they were. I'm going to tell you the results from last year. Sorry about that. Last year, what happened? It was awful, wasn't it? The Dow was down, what, 33%? Got my clicker backwards. The NASDAQ 40, the S&P 38, no matter what indices you use of the U.S. market, it was not pretty. The international market was down 38%. Barclays aggregate bond up 3%. So what's interesting about Barclays aggregate bond as a number up there, besides the fact that it's up? Did anybody ever heard of the Barclays aggregate bond index before? When you used to hear about bond indexes, what did you hear about? You remember it was the Lehman Brothers, right? Lehman Brothers bond index. Well, Lehman Brothers doesn't exist anymore. We had a few changes in our life since this time last year. Unemployment is down, or is up, rather, and inflation is down. So lots of changes, lots of changes. Now, let's take a stroll down memory lane and see, has this ever happened before? Because that's what people are saying, right? This time is different. This time is different. Well, is it different? Here's a piece out of Time magazine. So I'm going to read it and then see if you can guess when it is. Not for many years has a Christmas season begun with so many tidings of spreading discomfort and lack of joy about the U.S. economy. Already racked by devastating double-digit inflation, the nation is also plunging deeper into a recession that seems to be the longest and the most severe since World War II. Could have read this in the last 90 days. Anybody got a guess? December 4, close, 1974. Look at the guy on the front here, the Santa Claus. He looks pretty weary, doesn't he? Well, what happened? December 1974 actually marked a turning point in the market. The S&P soared the following year 37% in 1975 and 23% in 1976. Now, when you read the headline that we just a minute ago, would you have thought the market would have done really well? Wouldn't seem like a little bit of a disconnect, didn't it? Let's do another one. The American dream was dented a bit during the last recession. Mortgage money became so scarce and relatively few new houses were built. But the big and mercurial housing industry, which fell harder than almost any other business during the slump, is coming on strong in the current economic recovery. Any ideas? September 12th, 1977. Look at the front here. We have sky-high housing built up. So we were looking at a lot of inflation at that period of time. And inflation remained a headline issue, but the stock markets continued to prosper. Here's another one. See if you can figure out this one. In an age of economic anxiety, that's pretty foreboding, isn't it? Real and rising concerns about whether free enterprise can surmount the problems of inflation, energy, productivity. The relentless daily pounding of dismal news drives deeper the public's conviction that the economy is in a profound and morose crisis. Last 180 days. There's another. This is going to tell you what it is. Week after week, interest rates cracked new records. Homeowners face 17% mortgages. Energy, the oxygen of industrial life, has become so costly and politically controlled that the U.S. can no longer be certain of enough fuel to keep its factories running and homes heated.
75.
April 21st, 1980. Look at this. Capitalism, is it working? Have you heard that theme recently? Yeah. Well, with those headlines, you probably wouldn't have expected an annual return of 32% in the S&P in 1980. Sort of a disconnect between the headline and the return, isn't there? The markets continued their upward march in the early 80s. America's interest rate anguish continued. Here's a Time magazine cover for you. Anybody remember Paul Volcker? As somebody pointed out to me this morning, he's not dead. He's just not Federal Reserve Chairman anymore. Do you remember when he was Federal Reserve Chairman? And the title here is Interest Rate Anguish, 1982. So what was Time magazine saying in 1982? Expensive and scarce money has begun driving home builders and auto dealers, businessmen from every walk of life out of business in such numbers that bankruptcies around the country are beginning to rival those of the Great Depression. How many times have you heard this recently? It seems like every time I turn around, somebody's talking about this rivals the Great Depression, right? So we were talking about that here in 1982.